Hello, it's Lou Collins. Today I've got a magazine tutorial for you. Now this one's taking the recent Simply Cards and Papercraft issue 241 and using the stamps that have come with it. Now within this magazine you also get a fantastic sentiment for a bottle of gin, or you can use the word gin on it, or you can make a bottle of anything you wish, and also you have the bottle wrap there too. So you've got the template and then you've got these fantastic sort of floral and bottle themed stamps. I'm going to be focusing on the floral stamps. These are very, very me, and the idea is when you get a magazine like this, you will find that there's elements that suit your style more than maybe some of the other elements, and you can go with that. You don't have to use everything, you don't always have to follow everything in the magazine and copy those. You can of course take it off on your own spin. So I love watercolour and I love large florals, so these are right up my street. So what I'm going to do is, rather than stamping these in your traditional black, as you can see here on some of the examples, I'm going to stamp them in white and do a kind of a resist with them and apply some distressing, so some watercolours that way. So let's get started with this. First of all, I'm going to open the packet and really take a deep look. Now I don't usually look at these until I do the videos with you. So let's lift these out to the side. Things like this, things like the plastic, I tend to keep because they're ideal for doing my colour mixing on, as I'm going to show you there with that mat. Now looking at these, look at this. So we've got two different shaped bottles. We've got some fantastic sentiments there. You're the best, happy birthday, with love, let the celebrations be gin. Yeah, always celebration gin and all sorts there. So you can stamp into the bottles or you can stamp away from them. And then the florals, like I say, the florals are what I'm going to be focusing on, but there's those templates you can see too, absolutely gorgeous and a really good size as well. There's loads of tutorials inside the magazine showing you how to use, oh here you go, so how to use some of the florals on their own, but also how to use the bottles too. Now what you usually find with these magazines is the first few elements in here are all using that, we call it a cover mount, but the stamps or dies or templates or whatever it is you have on the front there. So you can see here you've got all of this inspiration to get you started. Okay, so what I've got is a DL card base, and I've cut myself a panel because I'm working with ink and water. What you often find is sometimes your cardstock will warp ever so slightly. So I don't want to do that to the card base. I want the card base to be nice and strong and solid. So I've got my card base, I've cut myself a panel slightly smaller, so it's like a mat on there, and I'm now going to put my card base well out of the way. So pop that over there so that it can't get wet, and that will remain nice and strong and straight. And then if this does warp slightly, I can adhere it to the card base afterwards and it will kind of flatten it all out. So my focus is definitely going to be this, which is the biggest stamp of them all, a big floral bouquet. Let's just pop these up to the side here, and I'm going to stamp these rather than stamping them as a bouquet, which would be this way up. You can see the stems at the bottom. I'm going to stamp this on the corner like so. So just like that. So taking my stamping platform, once I've got this positioned, I can pop this into the platform here and secure my cardstock down. Pick the stamp up. Now this is a brand new stamp, so I am going to use my rubber, my eraser, which is just, let's find that, there we go. And I'm just going to prep the surface. This just means taking a large pencil eraser and just gently rubbing it over the surface of the stamp. And what this does is just peels back any residue that's left from that manufacturing process. And this might be the reason why occasionally you find you get sort of pooling on the stamp for the first few impressions and then it wears off. Or sometimes you might need to wash it first of all. So that just does that job for you, gets that all ready. Now to prepare for heat embossing, I'm going to use my anti-static pad or bag. This just takes any static off of the cardstock, but also any greasy marks, anything that might interrupt the surface when we do our heat embossing, and allows the powder to only stick to the ink. Now as you saw, I moved my cardstock there, so I'm just going to do a dry run and make sure that that is still around about in the right place for me. Yeah, still happy with that. And take my embossing ink, so I've got Versamark, and press this all over those florals. I'm not worried about the stems because they're coming off the cardstock. It's not the end of the world if you do get ink on those. Now this is a clear ink, so you won't see too much here anyway, but let's just press that down. There we go. Now I'm just going to hold that up to the light so I can see that has stamped absolutely beautifully. So what I want to do now is carefully bring these down, and I want to reposition my stamp and do the same in this top corner too. Pick that up. I will just give this a dab over, and then again clear ink. Now this sticky ink, this embossing ink, does take a long time to dry, so don't worry about having to rush through embossing the first impression before you do the second. As long as you're not spending 10 minutes between each, you should be absolutely fine to do both of these at the same time. So I'm kind of creating a frame here. So hopefully, let's just carefully lift that one off from the centre. You won't be able to see it just now. I've got some florals at the bottom and the top there. Pop that aside and I'll clean that up in a little while. So now I need to bring in my card base, purely because I'm going to use it to catch the embossing powder. And just unscrew the lid there and put some white powder over the top. Don't worry if your white powder doesn't perfectly match your cardstock. Once you've got some colour over the top, you really won't see it. But hopefully there you can see now where that's just gripped onto the embossing ink, and the same the other side. And don't worry if you use your entire pot of powder, as long as you're catching it into something, and a card base is the perfect shape to capture the powder into, you're not wasting it because it's all going to go back into the pot again. It just means you get a good coverage on your stamped image. There we go. So let's now just make sure you've got no powder anywhere else through the centre. And let's take a heat gun. I've got this one here, is the Ranger Heat It craft tool, and I'm just going to heat emboss all of these. So I'm melting the powder until it melts and it goes glossy. You'll start to see the effect. To start with, you're going to have to hold your tool, let it warm up for a few seconds. After about 30 seconds, and maybe sometimes not even that, you'll start to see the powder just melt, and it'll go a brighter white usually as well. Now I like to melt this until not only does it melt, but it also smooths out as well, so I just hold it for a few seconds longer in each area, because it will melt but it will still have a bit of dimension. But if you keep it on there, careful not to burn it, but just a few seconds longer, that will just smooth out the image as well. And if you see you've got an area where you didn't quite melt all the crystals, you can go back. You can go back over it and reinvigorate that by heating it again. Be careful of your hands, because the heat does get very, very hot, obviously, but also the heat travels up the card. So where my hand is holding the cardstock, I can still feel that heat moving up. It's really quite warm. So use tweezers if you need to, if that's easier for you, to save your hands getting warm. A hairdryer isn't suitable for this. Some people have asked me before, can they use a hairdryer? No, it's not enough heat, and it's too much airflow, so it would just blow the powder around without melting it. Some people have asked if they can use like a paint stripping heat tool. No, absolutely not. That's the opposite. That is just too hot, and that will just burn your paper. You'll end up with a very singed mess, unfortunately. So definitely a craft heat tool is the way to go with these. There we go. So this is where you're going to start to see things happening. Let's bring that onto this piece of plastic that I took from around the magazine. That's going to protect my work surface. And I've chosen my coloured inks. These are my favourite 3 colours. I've got Broken China, I've got Seedless Preserves, Lucky Clover. So anything blue, green and purple, absolutely love it. So what I'm going to do now is take a water mist, and I'm just going to spritz the surface of these over the embossing. Now the embossing's cooled down, that's had plenty of time to cool. Now I'm just going to move these out of the way, and each of these I'm going to press into the surface of the mat. Some will show darker than others, but the ink will be there. And then get that the right way around, a little spritz on each one, and usually you'll see that will go a little bit darker as well. Now I need to take myself a paintbrush, and it's a good idea actually if your paintbrush is also wet, so just doing this off to the side there, just make sure that's damp so it doesn't just absorb your ink. Running out of water in mine, but there we go, lovely. Okay, so let's pick up a bit of blue first of all, and let's just start dropping that into here. So I'm just dabbing, as you can see, I'm not being precise with it, just start dabbing, and you can kind of colour in a few areas if there's a particular flower you'd like to have that colour, but really not precise with it at all. Then I'm going to go, I'm not even cleaning my brush off, I'm going to go in with the next colour, and again really non-precise, absolutely not precise at all. Make sure you kind of got most of it, and then lastly that green. This green is a really strong colour, so I'm just going to do small areas of this. There we go, so just dabbing. Now hopefully there's enough water left in here to again spritz, lots of spritzing. We need quite a lot here, and all you're going to do is allow those colours to just start bleeding and wicking into each other. Now I find with that I don't think I've quite got enough blue, so while it's all moving about I'm going to pick up a bit more blue and just add some blue in here, and the same on this side. I don't think the blue's quite strong enough compared to the other colours, and I want to leave that strip through the middle. So I'm going to give that a few minutes. Now what's happening is the colours are merging together. You can see pools of colour as well. Let's just take, there we go, a few little splats too. Lovely. So a bit of kitchen towel, you can sit and watch that. It's literally watching paint dry really. Now when you feel that's dried as much as, or the paint has moved around as much as you want, you can leave it and it will just continue to dry itself, or like me, I like to just place over a kitchen towel and just pick up some of the pools of colour, and that gives it all more of a pastel look, which is really pretty. There we go. And when you're happy with that, so hopefully you can now see we've got that pattern in the background, but we've got the lovely floral design through the watercolour. It's beautiful. So now I'm going to take everything away that's wet, still allowing that to sort of air dry for a little while, and I'm going to just gently apply some heat to that once I've had a clean up, just to finish drying it off. Now I'm a huge fan of both watercolours and pencil colouring as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some colouring pencils, and I'm just going to pick out some colour in some of these leaves and some of the flowers as well. Only one colour per flower, so I'm not going to be shading or anything, doing anything too technical, just colouring them in a little bit. So you'll have the background, the lovely background colours, and try to stick to the same sort of colours. So I've used obviously the green, the purpley colour and the blue, and I will remain with those colours. Some areas you'll find you don't have room to do that, but this is almost like a eucalyptus here, so I'm just doing a stronger colour, which means a heavier with colouring pencil at the base, and then fading that out, so going slightly lighter towards the end of the flower. And this is just going to add a little more detail, really pick the design of those berries, the leaves. I think, like I say, this is eucalyptus, this one. It's really pretty. So I'm going to work my way through the design, and it's really therapeutic doing this. Like I say, this is optional. You could just leave it with the lovely pastel shades that we created with the distress inks, or you could go in and start picking out the detail, and you'll see the full effect in a few moments. So there we go. So there I've just picked out some flowers, and that's given us a lovely sort of highlight and definition to the florals that are in the stamped image. So that's going to go back onto the front of this card now. When you pop it onto the clean white, it really pops. So let's put that on with some foam tape. Just got some here. And again, like I say, that will straighten that card back out if it's slightly warped from where you've been doing the water and the heating and such. A good idea to spritz with water both sides of the paper as well if you can, and then heat both sides too, and that will help even out any of that warping, because it just means that both sides, the fibres have been treated the same way, so they kind of balance out. So just 3 long strips of foam tape there. You can put more on if you wish, but I usually find there's no need, certainly for adhesion there's no need, and that shouldn't, it's on a cardstock rather than a paper, so we shouldn't get any bending of the paper. There we go. And then we just need to think about a sentiment now. I've got a strip there and we've got some lovely words here, really beautiful. I think I might do happy birthday or with love. Do you know what, let's just do a little with love. Let's just do a tiny little with love, and that's going to sit on the bottom, I think, there, just on a piece of clean white cardstock, because I want the flowers to really speak for themselves. I don't want to worry about covering up some of the work that we've just done. So again, just pop your cardstock down, place this down there as well. I love the font of this as well. Gently lift that up. Now this is a brand new stamp, so I will just prep this like so, and I'm going to use a black ink, so that's smoky grey. Here we go, Memento. The contrast of the black will hopefully allow that to stand up. I'm using a stamping platform in case I need to go over it again. I think that's perfect. I think that's a really nice impression there. So give that a few seconds to dry, cut that out, and then pop that again with foam tape just over some of the florals there. There we go. There we go, just a little with love in the corner, nice and subtle, allowing the background to really be the focal point on this card. So that is a card created using the elements that have come with Simply Cards and Papercraft issue 241. You can get yours now. It's absolutely beautiful, particularly if you do love a gin. Summer's coming up. I know some of us like to sit in the garden in the summer with one, and I'm sure you've got friends and family who like a little tipple now and then, but alternatively you've got absolutely gorgeous florals with this, so you can make cards like this.